Welcome back to Litcast. We're going to be exploring themes in our upcoming episodes of Litcast, and today we're going to be looking at an equitable society or the class system in An Inspector Calls. So this play is particularly interesting in that so many of its themes intrinsically link to context. So if you understand the context of this play, then you will inevitably understand most of the themes because they are drawn so heavily from that context. So one of the ones that tends to come up is this idea of a class system versus an equitable society. So in the play, Priestley wants to present us with this clear social message. And this is, like I said, why looking back at the context can be really useful, because lots of the things that I'll talk about here just very much link to context. We're shown this really comfortable home, this rich way of life with the Burling family, and then we have that stark contrast of the desperate attempts of not just Eva Smith, but all of the workers to better themselves and their livelihoods by asking for a wage increase, and then this drab, horrendous life that Eva Smith is subjected to as a result of her being sacked by Mr. Burling, and then all of the actions by the rest of the Burlings and Crofts that follow. So the inspector champions the cause of the poor. He tries to get others to accept that all people share this common humanity and so are part of an interdependent community. This is it's quite a Christian message, but quite a socialist message, and you'll see that there's lots and lots of quotes from the inspector that talk about this idea of sharing responsibility, being members of one body, being responsible for each other, but also the idea that you're here but for the grace of God. You're in this position because luck had it, basically, and society and fortune dealt you some good cards, and you should almost sort of be aware of that, be aware of your fortune and aware of the situations of others. So the message definitely seems to get through to Eric and Sheila, but their father dismisses the idea of a community. Remember, bees in a hive and all that nonsense, in which responsibility and guilt are shared as the foolish mutterings of socialist cranks. But as the play progresses, the inspector's point is to put across more and more forcefully this idea of being a voice of conscience for those who are less fortunate. And the Burlings and Gerald don't really seem to pick up on this or willfully ignore it, kind of more to the point. The inspector points out what would happen if injustice and inequality were allowed to continue unchecked. So his oratorial style, the way that he speaks, might sometimes seem exaggerated. His final speech where he talks about if you don't learn it, you'll be taught it in fire and blood and brimstone, good night, seems quite overly dramatic, and quite often that is delivered directly to the audience, which packs that extra punch as well. And it's a real mic drop moment because he just storms out after delivering that speech to silence. But what that is the culmination of building up those messages repeatedly. And that's what a theme is, a repeated idea. He's building up these messages that we are part of a society, we are responsible for each other, we have a duty to protect each other, to look out for each other, because we don't know what's around the corner for ourselves as well. And, there's many things that, like a 1945 audience would still have issues with their society. And even today, when we watch the play, there's many things that we would probably see as being unfair. If you think about big corporations where CEOs are earning billions and the fact there are more billionaires on the planet than there ever have been, but then there's also huge swathes of poverty and a cost of living crisis. So there's lots of ideas of this monetary inequality and societal inequality. But when looking at this play, it's important that we realise that Priestley isn't writing about what is just unfair. It's about people having no rights. It's about this being legislative and just being baked into society. So they had to depend upon the goodwill of employers much more than people might do today. So today, people might join trade unions that are designed to protect their rights. However effectively they do that, there's still that idea that you can join something that protects you in cases where things get bad at work. Whereas in the early 19th century, it was actually illegal for people to join a trade union, and the punishment for doing that was to be transported to prison colonies in Australia. We're talking about a whole different level of a lack of rights. And that's not to say that, like we said, things are not unfair today, but we are talking about a society where there was zero rights. It was a different type of inequality in terms of Britain. And Priestley wants us to see that Eva Smith, therefore, having no employment rights and also not very many societal rights as a woman, this means that she is completely at the mercy of these people and their decision making. And as she comes into contact with each of them, her situation gets worse and worse and worse because they don't help her and they make selfish decisions and the wrong decisions. And this is why it's particularly effective if you think of Eva Smith as being the same character all the way through. And that's what we're encouraged to do, is think of her as being the same girl rather than, as Gerald suggests, a different girl. So seeing her on this downward spiral, and the fact that even we know that when things seem to be going okay for her, that's not going to last very long. So this idea of equitable society, it's important to think about that lack of rights, lack of societal rights, lack of employment rights, which means that the cards are stacked against you, and it's so difficult to get yourself out of that. And it's a beyond unfair society. All right, so that's just a few notes on the theme of societal equality or the class system in an Inspector Calls. Thank you so much for listening. We'll have a few more themes coming up in our future episodes, so stay tuned for them, and I will see you in the next one. Listening to Litcast, the podcast for GCSE and A-level revision. The music that you hear in this episode is called Galaxy and was written by Ixon, and you can find the rest of his music on SoundCloud. You can also find us on other social media channels, including YouTube, where you'll also find our Litcast live episodes. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you again.